When my husband stormed out of the house that afternoon, dragging his oversized suitcase across the porch while I stood there in my pajama pants and tank top, it felt like the end of my world. The screech of his tires as he sped away still rings in my ears sometimes. But you know what else I remember? The smug little smirk on my sister's face when she showed up less than 10 minutes later. The silver BMW pulled up like it was part of a movie scene. Out she stepped, perfectly dressed, hairstyled, makeup flawless, sunglasses perched on top of her head. She didn't even look at me with shame or guilt. No, she looked at me with triumph, as if she had just won. The betrayal that cut. Twice it wasn't just my husband's betrayal that gutted me. Husbands cheat. God knows it happens. But a sister, your own blood, that's a whole new level of betrayal. When she threw her little verbal dagger, he needed someone who actually listens for once. I swear it wasn't just an insult. It was a declaration. She wanted me to know that she had replaced me not only as his wife, but as his confidant, his partner, his person. And in that moment, as furious as I was, I noticed something else too. She was too eager, too rehearsed. It, too, was the look of someone desperate to prove they'd won, even though deep down, they knew they hadn't. Their perfect beginning. The days that followed were filled with whispers and side glances from neighbors. People saw his car parked overnight at her apartment. They saw them grocery shopping together. I even overheard one of her co-workers bragging about how she'd finally got the man she always wanted. They paraded their little fling around like it was a victory lap. She'd post pictures of them on Instagram, her holding a wine glass with the caption, "Cheers to new beginnings." Or him in the background cooking in her kitchen, captioned, "When love finds you where you least expect it." I should have been shattered, and maybe a part of me was. But another part, I just watched, because even then, I could see the cracks. Forming cracks in the illusion first, it was money. See, my husband always had a terrible relationship with finances. He relied on me to keep the bills straight, the savings intact, the budget balanced. Without me, he was a mess. And I knew it wouldn't take long before reality hit. Sure enough, I overheard him at the gas station one morning, arguing with the cashier because his card kept getting declined. The embarrassment on his face? Delicious. Then, there was time. He was late to work constantly. With me, I used to wake him up, remind him of meetings, make sure his shirts were ironed. Without me, he showed up rumpled, unshaven, and unfocused. By the third week, I heard whispers that HR was keeping an eye on him. And as for my sister, well, she had no idea what she'd gotten herself into. The sister's struggles, my sister was always the princess. She liked the brunches, the fancy outfits, the nights out with the girls. She liked men who spoiled her, men who already had their lives together. But my husband? He wasn't that man without me. She thought she was stealing a fully assembled prize package. What she actually got was a fixer-upper in free fall. I saw her one afternoon outside our mom's house, pacing on the sidewalk with her phone pressed to her ear. "Mom, you don't understand. He's so needy. He's late all the time. He has no money and he's constantly complaining about stress. I can't deal with this." Her voice carried shrill and frustrated. I almost laughed, because that was the moment I knew. She didn't win. She trapped herself. My quiet satisfaction. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. I didn't scream. I didn't lash out. I didn't beg him to come back or demand apologies from her. I went about my life, watering my plants, walking my cat, making dinner for myself. To outsiders, it might have looked like I was defeated. But inside, I was calm, because I knew something they didn't. Cheaters don't thrive. Betrayers don't win. Not long term. They were celebrating in the short term, thinking they had broken me. But what they didn't realize was that the more they flaunted their victory, the faster they were accelerating their downfall. The neighborhood watch. And trust me, people were watching. Neighbors whispered about the audacity of my sister, about the foolishness of my husband. Every time someone saw them together, it wasn't admiration in their eyes. It was disgust. She stole her sister's husband. Can you believe that? I overheard at the mailbox. What kind of man leaves his wife for her own blood? Another neighbor muttered at the grocery store. They thought they were being seen as a power couple. In reality, they were the neighborhood scandal, and the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. The beginning of the end. The illusion lasted maybe a month before it began to crumble. The money troubles worsened. His job performance tanked. My sister's patience wore thin, and their once Instagram-worthy relationship quickly turned into late-night arguments that echoed through the thin apartment walls. Meanwhile, I sipped wine on my porch, listening to the chaos drift across the street like background music, to a show I'd already seen 100 times. Because betrayal always feels like victory in the beginning. But it's never built to last, and deep down I knew I hadn't even done anything yet. Their downfall was just beginning, and that's when I decided I wasn't just going to sit back and let karma do all the work. No, I was going to make sure their betrayal backfired in the most satisfying way possible. This was only the opening act. The Instagram filter fades. For the first couple of weeks, my sister and my ex-husband, let's just call him Mark to make things simple, were practically glued together. She posted photos of them sipping cocktails at rooftop bars, selfies in his car, late-night dinners with candles. To anyone scrolling by, it looked like a modern fairy tale. But here's the thing about fairy tales on Instagram. They always have filters. Filters hide the mess. Filters hide the exhaustion. Filters hide the reality. And the reality? Behind those carefully staged photos, Mark was spiraling. Money makes the cracks wider. I wasn't surprised when the first unpaid bills started showing up at my house. Apparently, Mark had forgotten to update his mailing address with our utilities and insurance. I stacked the envelopes neatly on the counter, each one a reminder that without me, his life was falling apart piece by piece. My sister had always lived off other people's stability. She dated men who could afford the dinners, the trips, the shopping bags. But Mark wasn't that man anymore. One evening, I overheard them arguing outside her apartment. I was coming home from the store and their voices carried across the quiet street. "You promised you'd cover rent this month," she snapped. "I said I'd try," Mark shouted back. "I've got enough on my plate already. My paycheck barely covers my own expenses." "And what about that BMW payment?" she hissed. "That's your car, not mine." The argument ended, with her storming back inside and slamming the door, leaving him standing there in the dark. And me? I smiled to myself as I walked past. Family fallout. But the cracks weren't just financial. They were personal. See, my sister and I shared more than just a bloodline. We shared a mother who didn't take betrayal lightly. When my mom found out about their relationship, she called me first. Her voice was low, controlled, but heavy with disappointment. "She's blocked me," I said flatly when Mom asked if I'd heard from my sister. "Good," Mom replied, "because until she comes to her senses, she's not welcome here." Word spread fast through the rest of the family. My cousins, aunts, even our grandmother, nobody wanted to be around her. And that isolation, it burned her. She thought she was upgrading her life by stealing Mark. Instead, she lost her family support system, her safety net, the very people who used to cheer her on. I'll never forget the look on her face the next time I passed her in town, her once confident smile replaced with tight lips and hollow eyes. Victory doesn't feel so sweet when you're eating alone. Work trouble. Meanwhile, Mark's job was dangling by a thread. One of his co-workers, an old friend of mine, sent me a casual text. "Not sure if you've heard, but Mark's been late like every other day. Boss isn't happy. People are betting he won't last another month." I could picture it perfectly. Mark, once polished and dependable because I held his world together, now stumbling in late, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. My sister probably had no idea how much maintenance he required. And truthfully, that gave me a sick kind of satisfaction. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I wanted them both to realize that their so-called new beginning was nothing more than a ticking time bomb. The neighbors notice. It wasn't just me who saw the cracks. Our neighbors saw everything too. Mrs. Alvarez from 2 doors down mentioned it while trimming her roses. You hear them fighting almost every night now, she said, lowering her voice. Used to be so loud I couldn't watch my shows in peace. Even Mr. Carter, the retired vet across the street, shook his head one morning as we both grabbed our newspapers. Man leaves his wife for her sister, he muttered. And now they can't go 2 days without a screaming match. What did they expect? It was almost funny. The same people who once whispered about me now couldn't stop talking about them. The spotlight had shifted, and it wasn't flattering. The sister's breaking point, the real turning point, though, came one Friday night. I was curled up on my couch with my cat, sipping tea, when I heard a car door slam so hard it rattled my windows. Peeking through the blinds, I saw my sister storming out of her apartment in that same BMW. She was in sweats, her hair a mess, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Mark followed her to the driveway, yelling something I couldn't quite make out. She screamed back, "I gave up everything for you and this is what I get?" She shoved him backward with both hands before jumping in her car and peeling off into the night. The scene was messy, raw, and perfect, because in that moment I realized their perfect little empire wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. My restraint, I wanted so badly to laugh, to yell out the window, "How's that working out for you?" But I didn't. Because I knew silence was louder. The less I said, the less I did, the more their downfall would feel like karma instead of revenge. But deep inside, a seed was growing. I didn't just want to watch them destroy themselves. I wanted to guide the destruction. I wanted to be the architect of their collapse. And as I sat there in the dark, sipping the last of my tea, I realized I wasn't just going to let this play out naturally. I was going to intervene. Carefully. Strategically. Quietly. They thought they'd broken me. But really, I was just getting started. The screams through the walls I remember one night vividly. It was late, past midnight, and I was reading in bed when the sound of shouting shattered the quiet. At first, I thought it was the TV again, but then came the unmistakable thud of something heavy hitting the wall. I froze. Then came my sister's voice, sharp and shrill. "You're pathetic, Mark. You can't even take care of yourself, let alone me." His voice followed, hoarse and desperate. "Oh, like you're perfect. You don't lift a damn finger. All you do is complain." The fight escalated, echoing down the street. A lamp shattered, a door slammed. And me? I sat in the dark, a smile tugging at my lips. Because this wasn't love. It wasn't passion. It was combustion. The public show, of course, private chaos rarely stays private for long. The next weekend, they showed up at a neighborhood block party together. At first, they tried to play the part of a happy couple, her clinging to his arm, him pouring drinks and laughing too loudly, but the cracks were obvious. When he left her side to grab food, she rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath. When she laughed at a neighbor's joke, he glared daggers at her across the lawn. And then it happened. He snapped at her, loudly, in front of everyone. "For once, can you stop acting like such a brat?" He hissed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My sister's face went scarlet, her mouth hanging open. She grabbed her wine glass, tossed the rest of it at his shirt, and stormed out. Mark stood there, dripping red wine, staring at the ground while everyone pretended not to look. I nearly choked on my lemonade. It was the most satisfying social train wreck I'd ever witnessed. The gossip mill turns by Monday. The entire neighborhood was buzzing. Mrs. Alvarez told the story to anyone who would listen while clipping coupons at the grocery store. Mr. Carter reenacted the moment at the barber shop. Even the teenagers on the block whispered about the sister who stole her brother-in-law but can't even keep him. They had become a cautionary tale, and in the court of public opinion, they were already guilty. My sister's desperation. It didn't take long before my sister's desperation reached me directly. She showed up at my door one afternoon, eyes swollen, mascara smeared. I didn't even know what to say when I opened the door. The audacity of her standing there, after everything, was almost laughable. "Can we talk?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside and let her in. She sat at my kitchen table, fidgeting with her nails. "I don't know what to do," she admitted finally. He's not the man I thought he was. He's broke, He's angry all the time and he keeps blaming me for everything. I raised an eyebrow. And what exactly did you expect? Her face crumpled. I don't know. I thought we could be happy. I thought he loved me. There it was, the line, the pathetic, pitiful truth. I almost laughed in her face. But instead, I leaned back and let silence fill the space, because silence was heavier than any insult I could throw. Mark's meltdown. Meanwhile, Mark was unraveling at work. My friend from his office sent another update. He blew up at the boss. Today. Full-on yelling match. HR's getting involved. Pretty sure he's done for. I could picture it. Mark, red-faced, veins bulging, spitting words he'd regret later. The same man who once prided himself on being calm and collected was now a walking disaster. And when his job finally let him go, the collapse was complete. No money, no reputation. No stability, just anger, shame, and desperation. The final straw, the breaking point, the moment that truly cemented their downfall, came one stormy night. I was on my porch, watching the rain pour down, when I heard tires screeching in the distance. Moments later, Mark's car came flying into the driveway of my sister's apartment. He stumbled out, clearly drunk, slamming the door so hard the car alarm chirped. He pounded on her door, shouting her name, demanding she let him in. At first, there was silence. Then her voice rang out, muffled but clear. "Go sleep in your car, Mark. I'm done," he shouted, cursed, begged. But she never opened the door. Eventually, he slumped onto the porch, drenched, muttering to himself until he passed out. The next morning, I watched from my window as she stepped over his body to leave for work, her heels clicking against the wet concrete. No sympathy, no pity, nothing. That was it. The final fracture. My decision. Watching it all unfold, I realized something important. They were destroying themselves just fine, but that wasn't enough for me anymore. Not after the humiliation. Not after the betrayal. Not after the way they flaunted their so-called victory in my face. I didn't just want to watch them collapse. I wanted to be the one who pushed the last domino. So I started planning, quietly, carefully, strategically. If karma was already at work, I was going to accelerate it, because this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about revenge. And with that thought, I closed my blinds, poured myself another glass of wine, and began to sketch out exactly how I was going to finish what they had started. They thought they'd taken everything from me, but soon they were going to learn the truth. I hadn't lost anything important. They had. The quiet observer becomes the player for months. I had been a spectator, watching, waiting, letting karma nibble at their heels. But now? Now it was my turn to step onto the stage. The beauty of revenge isn't in rushing, it's in crafting. It's in patience, precision, and timing. And as I sat at my kitchen table one Sunday morning, notebook open, pen in hand, I felt more alive than I had in years. Because for the first time since Mark left, I wasn't the one losing. I was the one writing the script. Weakness number 1, their finances. The first crack was obvious: money. Mark had lost his job. My sister's taste for luxury didn't match her paycheck. They were already drowning in overdue bills, so I made sure the water kept rising. I called in favors, friends at the bank, acquaintances in collections, even a neighbor who worked for a credit bureau. Nothing illegal, but enough whispers, enough reminders, enough routine checks to make their financial world tighter and tighter. Within weeks, their credit cards were maxed out, their utilities threatened shutoff, and the BMW? Repossessed. And every time I drove past her apartment and saw the empty space where that shiny car once sat, my grin grew wider. Weakness pro. Their reputation. Money might sting, but reputation? That was the artery. I started small, comments. Dropped in the right conversations. "Oh, have you heard about Mark?" "Yeah, rough time at work. Got let go for anger issues." "Did you see what his girlfriend did? She stole her own sister's husband. Can you imagine?" People love gossip. They feed on it, and I gave them a feast. Soon, whispers turned into stories. Stories turned into judgments. And judgments turned into cold shoulders at every social gathering. They weren't just disliked, they were outcasts. Weakness number 3, their relationship, but the most delicate piece, the masterpiece, was their relationship itself. Because nothing kills a doomed romance faster than planting just enough doubt to let insecurity fester. And who better to do that than me? I created an anonymous email account. I crafted carefully worded messages, short but sharp, each one designed to twist the knife between them. To my sister, he's been sneaking out. Thought you should know. Check his phone. To Mark, she's only with you for the money. Ask her where she was Friday night. Neither email was technically a lie. He had been sneaking out to drink, and she was only with him for the lifestyle. She couldn't afford a loan. But the brilliance was in how they read it, because once suspicion enters a relationship built on betrayal, it spreads like poison. The confrontation. I orchestrated one night. The chaos I'd seeded bloomed beautifully. I was in my living room when the shouting began next door. This time, it wasn't just anger. It was paranoia. Who's been texting? You at midnight? Mark bellowed. Nobody! You're imagining things! My sister screeched back. Lies. Accusations. Doors slamming. I sat there sipping tea, listening to the symphony of destruction I had composed. And the sweetest part? They didn't even know I was the conductor, planting the final seed, but I wasn't. Done. Not even close. The final piece of my blueprint wasn't about them fighting each other. It was about them fighting themselves. I waited until my sister went to work one morning. Then I slid a plain manila envelope under her door. Inside were screenshots, fake but believable, of Mark messaging another woman. The photos weren't graphic, but they were damning. Just enough to look like flirting. Just enough to make her blood boil. Later that night, the screaming was worse than ever. You swore you loved me, she cried. And you swore you weren't crazy. He fired back. The sound of glass shattering followed. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the satisfaction wash over me. Why it worked. Here's the truth. Revenge doesn't need to be violent. It doesn't need fire or fists or fury. The most effective revenge is quiet, invisible, undetectable, like termites in the foundation, like a crack in the dam. They never saw me coming. They didn't even know I was there, and that was what made it so intoxicating. My sister's visit a week later, she showed up again at my door. Her eyes were hollow. Her hands shook as she held a crumpled tissue. He's cheating on me, she whispered. I tilted my head, feigning shock. Really? I found messages, she said. Some woman. I don't even know who she is. I forced sympathy into my tone. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Inside, though, I was screaming with laughter, because the woman she thought existed didn't. She was my creation. The blueprint complete. That night, as I watched her walk back to her apartment, shoulders slumped, mascara smeared again, I knew my blueprint was complete. Their finances were gone. Their reputation was shredded. Their relationship was poisoned. And me? I was free. For the first time in months, I slept soundly, because I didn't just survive their betrayal. I owned it. And the best part? The real revenge hadn't even started yet. By now, the seeds of chaos had already sprouted, but I wasn't satisfied with cracks in their walls. I wanted the entire house to collapse. The perfect opportunity, it came in the form of a family event. My cousin was getting married, and as awkward as it sounded, both Mark and my sister had RSVP'd. At first, I debated skipping it altogether. Why should I waste my time in the same room as those two? But then I realized this was the stage I needed. What better place to deliver the final blow than in front of the very people whose approval my sister craved most? The wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was going to be my battlefield. The information drop-in. The weeks leading up, I gathered my ammunition. Bank statements showing Mark's overdrafts. Court documents from his termination dispute. Screenshots of his angry emails to HR. And of course, the fake but oh so believable messages between Mark and the other woman I had invented. One tidy little package of humiliation, and I wasn't planning to use it in whispers. I was planning to make it explode. The wedding night. The ceremony was beautiful. Soft music, fairy lights, laughter floating through the summer air. But I wasn't paying attention to the vows or the flowers. I was watching them. My sister strutted in wearing a dress that screamed for attention. Mark trailed behind, looking uncomfortable in a suit that didn't quite fit anymore. They acted like they belonged, like nothing was wrong. But I knew better. And so did karma. The toast it happened during the reception. The champagne was flowing, the dance floor buzzing. My cousin's best friend had just finished his toast, and the mic was free. I stood up, glass in hand. My heart pounded, but my smile was steady. I just want to say a few words, I began. Dozens of heads turned. My sister's eyes narrowed, suspicion flashing. I raised my glass. Marriage is built on trust, loyalty, and respect. Without those things, I paused, letting my gaze drift to them. It all falls apart. A ripple went through the crowd. My sister shifted uncomfortably. Mark looked down at his glass. Then I delivered the blow. And since we're here celebrating love, maybe it's the right time for certain truths to come out. I pulled the envelope from my purse. Gasps echoed as I placed it on the table. Mark, maybe you'd like to explain these? The explosion. He froze. She froze. Whispers erupted. Someone opened the envelope. Papers spilled out. Emails, screenshots, statements. The room filled with murmurs, then outrage. Wait, he cheated again? Someone whispered loudly. He's broke, another gasped. And she's still with him? My sister's face went pale, then blotchy red. She grabbed the papers with shaking hands. This isn't real, she screeched. She made this up. But the damage was done. Dozens of relatives, neighbors, family friends, everyone they'd wanted to impress, were staring at them with judgment in their eyes. Mark tried to speak, stammering something about lies and setups, but nobody cared. Because in that moment, the truth didn't matter. Perception did. And the perception was clear. They were a fraud. The public fallout, my uncle was the first to speak up. You cheated on your wife with her sister, and now this? You disgust me. Others chimed in. The room filled with accusations. Mutters of betrayal, pitying glances aimed at me. My sister tried to defend herself, but every word made her sound more desperate. Mark stood there, sweating, eyes darting, trapped like a rat. Finally, the bride herself, my cousin, spoke. I want you both to leave. The silence that followed was deafening. And then, slowly, they left. Two figures walking out of the hall, heads bowed, whispers chasing them like shadows. Aftermath. The gossip spread like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew. Not just family, friends, co-workers, neighbors. My sister stopped showing up at family events altogether. She avoided calls, blocked people on social media. Mark? He spiraled deeper. The job rejections piled up. His drinking worsened. And the best part? They blamed each other. Every insult, every scream, every broken plate was aimed at the person they thought had ruined their life. But the truth? I had ruined them both. My peace. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Not because they suffered, but because justice was finally visible. They had humiliated me publicly. I had humiliated them publicly. They had betrayed me with lies. I had destroyed them with lies, and though some might argue two wrongs don't make a right, I disagree. Sometimes two wrongs make balance. My reflection. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about what my sister once said to me years ago. I'll always be better than you. Now, she had nothing. No car, no reputation, no relationship. Not even the family she thought she could rely on. And me? I had everything that mattered. Peace of mind, self-respect, and the satisfaction of knowing I was stronger than both of them. Combined. The sweetest revenge isn't rage, it's calm. It's the ability to look at your betrayers and say, "You can't touch me anymore." Silence. After the storm, the days after the wedding felt strangely quiet. No screaming next door, no slammed doors, no 2 a.m. arguments echoing through the thin apartment walls. For the first time in months, my life felt like mine again. It was almost unsettling, like the absence of chaos created its own kind of noise. But deep down, I knew this wasn't silence. It was aftermath. My sister's collapse, it didn't take long for the ripple effects to show. She tried to hold her head high, pretending she didn't care what people thought. Posting selfies, captions about living her best life. But behind the filters, the truth was impossible to hide. She was cut off from the family. Mom blocked her number after one too many screaming matches. Dad told her point blank, "You broke this family." Her so-called friends? Gone. Nobody wanted to be associated with the homewrecker, and slowly, she disappeared from everyone's lives. From the outside, it looked like she had chosen Mark. But from the inside, she had no one left to choose. Mark's downfall, Mark's spiral was even faster. No steady job, no income. Drinking more than eating. I heard whispers that he'd been caught shoplifting from a convenience store, too drunk to realize the cameras were recording. It was pathetic. The man who once strutted out of my house with his suitcase like he was walking into a brighter future, now reduced to a cautionary tale. Don't be like him, people would say. And that was all the legacy he had left. My freedom and me? I thrived. Not in a flashy Instagram-worthy way. Not with new cars or new partners or dramatic declarations of victory. No. My revenge wasn't about proving myself to the world. It was about reclaiming myself from the wreckage. I went back to school part-time, something I'd put off for years. I picked up hobbies again, painting, jogging, even gardening on my tiny balcony. I reconnected with old friends who told me over and over, "We're so glad to have the real you back." And every time I laughed, every time I slept soundly, through the night, every time I looked in the mirror and saw peace instead of pain, that was my victory, the final encounter. But karma wasn't done. Months later, I saw her again. My sister. It was at the grocery store. I almost didn't recognize her at first. The makeup was gone. The designer clothes replaced by cheap knockoffs. Her hair was messy, her shoulders hunched. She froze when she saw me. For a moment, I thought she might scream, cry, or beg, but she didn't. She just whispered, almost to herself, "You won." I tilted my head, calm, steady. "No," I said softly. "I just survived. The rest, you did to yourself." And with that, I walked away. The realization as I loaded groceries into my car, I realized something important. Revenge hadn't destroyed them. They had destroyed themselves. All I did was set the stage, pull a few strings, and let their own flaws do the rest. Betrayers always betray. Liars always lie. And selfish people always implode. My revenge wasn't about creating their downfall. It was about making sure I wasn't buried in it with them. My reflection to you. So here's what I've learned and what I want you to take from this story. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who people truly are. Revenge doesn't have to be fire and fury. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply watching, waiting. And the ultimate victory? It's not their suffering. It's your freedom. Because, in the end, I didn't lose a husband. I didn't lose a sister. I lost 2 anchors that were dragging me down. And when they sank, I rose. Closing words. At night, when I sit on my balcony with a glass of wine, the world feels different. Not perfect, not magically healed, but mine. And sometimes I almost want to thank them, because without their betrayal, I might never have found my strength. But then I remember the pain, the humiliation, the lies, and instead of thanking them, I thank myself for surviving, for fighting back, for winning not in their world, but in mine. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been betrayed by a partner, a friend, a family member, remember this. Revenge isn't always about destroying them. It's about refusing to let them destroy you. And trust me, when they finally crumble under the weight of their own choices, that's when you'll realize karma was your best ally all along.